live with our guest, Hamid Shojaee. Hamid is the founder of Savvy Trader, Axosoft, Arizona Cowork, Arizona Disruptors, and a longtime startup investor and longtime advocate for tech entrepreneurs. I have the pleasure of knowing him since he was a young lad in high school. Thank you, Hamid. Appreciate you being on today.
Hi, so we got into our share of trouble when we were teenagers, didn't we?
We did. And I always bring up the story of you borrowing your mom's Ford Taurus and going on the freeway side ramps at 45 degrees with myself and my sister in your car. And when I first met you, and I'm like, this guy's nuts, but it's a lot of fun. So Hamid, tell us a little bit about tell us about your background as an Iranian-American.
Yeah, so I was born in Iran, which makes me that's the Iranian part. I grew up there until I was 10 years old, and my family moved to the U.S. We came straight to Arizona, which is where my brother already lived, and we sort of made Arizona our home. And I grew up in Arizona from 10 years old, went to junior high, then high school, and went to ASU. Went to school here, and then eventually started my software companies here as well. So I consider myself mostly Americanized, but of course, there's a lot of planted seeds that happens when you're born in another country, and of course have parents from another country. So those Iranian roots are definitely there. So that's a little bit background about where I came from.
Okay, so talking about those seeds that were planted back in the day, share with us how some of the experiences you had, coming to a new country. What do you think in your upbringing helped support you as a successful entrepreneur?
The biggest factor was probably just watching my parents work their ass off, as many immigrants in general do, because your parents usually have left a lot from where they came from and started over, new language, new jobs. Oftentimes they're not qualified for getting well-paid jobs, so they're sort of forced to start their own businesses. In my parents' case, they already own businesses in Iran, so they were entrepreneurs to begin with, and of course they started their own business in Arizona as well. Just a simple gift shop, nothing super fancy, but they worked their ass off on that business, and you just sort of through osmosis learn about cost of goods sold, and profitability has to do with sort of keeping expenses low and trying to increase revenue as much as possible. So there's a lot of things that you sort of learn that you don't even realize that you're learning by just observing or being in the environment of entrepreneurs who are working every day, like 7 days a week, and still coming home, making dinner, and doing family time and not missing a beat. And I know your parents also had similar sort of work ethics, so that rubs off on you to some extent. And when I started a software company, just running it very frugally was a very key aspect of the success factor.
Okay, well, I like the running it frugally. We'll maybe later get to what happens, what the negative consequences of having too much funding for a startup can be, and why the frugal part actually may drive better decisions. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Sorry to interrupt, but too much funding was never a problem for Arizona startups, just until maybe recently, just because there wasn't much funding. It wasn't like Silicon Valley in Arizona, where if you had a good idea, you'd have $5-10 million thrown at you. In Arizona, if you had a good idea and $1 million of revenue, you might be able to get another $1 million, right? And until you had revenue and show very consistent growth and potential profitability, Arizona investors didn't really understand tech. So in a lot of cases, a lot of Arizona startups grew organically and profitably from early on, or people invested their own money and made it work, right? So now we're getting into a cycle where some of those success stories have turned into sort of investors in the next generation, and I think that finally there's sort of like money available for great ideas in Arizona, but having too much funding was not usually much of a problem for Arizona startups.
Yes, and I know you helped. Some of those organizations you started really helped bring attention and funding and support for startups over the last 10, 15 years. So the landscape has changed, and I think you had a big influence in that. So grateful for that. As far as going back to your journey, what did you learn? If there's someone listening that's a new tech entrepreneur and they're trying to, maybe two levels. One is they're trying to say, hey, is this something a journey that's worth going through? There's that mental piece that you're willing to take on the risk and et cetera to try your vision of your new product. So let's talk about that piece, and then maybe the journey to product market fit. Those seems to be the initial hurdles that people face in the space. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's actually really tough, and it's tough every time as well. And I'm not sure I'm any better at it today than I was when I first started Axosoft, which is the company that became a success story for me. Oftentimes, you sort of one of the things that you don't realize as a founder is that you're either starting something that's going against the wind or against the tide, or with it. And you have no idea which way it's going to be. And it turned out that like when I started Axosoft, the timing was right, and I had a little bit of wind behind the sails without even realizing it. So just to sort of set the background on Axosoft in particular, when it started, it was a project management tool similar to like Atlassian's Jira. I started it in 2004 timeframe. Atlassian Jira had started a couple of years earlier, but this sort of transition of going from DOS-based or Windows-based applications to web-based project management and sort of keeping track of bugs and features that people are building, software developers are building in applications was happening very rapidly. And more software development teams were picking a tool, and I happened to build a tool for myself initially that I put out there on the internet for other people to use. Lots of people started using it and gave me all kinds of great feedback. Initially, it was free. So as I kept improving it, I decided to charge for it and see if anybody's willing to pay. And people were all of a sudden willing to pay. In the first month, I had like a couple $1,000s in sales, and I was like, "Wow, this is kind of cool." And I just kept it going. And after like a year, I had enough sales per month that could replace my salary. At the time, I was working at Microsoft. And I thought, okay, I could do this on a full-time basis. Why don't I leave my job and work on it on a full-time basis? And then the revenue just growth happened so quickly with almost little to no marketing or marketing savviness, just from word of mouth, and just the market was sort of ready for a product like that. So my company's revenue grew from like 50,000 the first year to 300,000 the second year to 800,000 the third year to 2.2 million the fourth year, all organically and profitably without us sort of like even with a very small team, without us even knowing like what the heck we're doing, and when we grew to roughly like $5 million in revenue, before it slowed down all of a sudden, like almost like a like we'd pump the brakes or something. And when it slowed down, we had the best sales team ever. We had the best marketing team ever. We had the best product ever. We had the best development team ever. Like everything in the company was the best it had ever been. And all of a sudden, like we slowed down in revenue. And what had happened in the meantime is that Atlassian's Jira had like outpaced our growth by 10x, more than 10x. And in fact, their product was priced cheaper. So the real number of users was even maybe 20 or 30x our product. And eventually it had gotten to the point where it had become the standard. So if you were a dev team, you would choose Jira because it integrated with everything, and your developers were more likely to know it. If you hired new developers, they're more likely to have already been using it. So that became the de facto standard. Whether it was better or not, or whether people preferred our user interface or user experience or not, and all of a sudden, like our sales dried up, and we couldn't like grow sales anymore. So it was just fascinating lessons. And then, like as you do a post-mortem on a product, and you realize like what could have happened is like, well, we had a lot of wind behind our sails. We didn't even know it between 2004 and 2010, but by the time that 2010 happened, now we had a lot of headwind, and we couldn't sort of like pass the headwind, right? Like, so it's really tough for founders or entrepreneurs to sort of like exactly see that whether or not they have tailwind or headwind in a product market fit situation until they try it and see what's happening. And unfortunately, you have to try it, iterate quickly, keep trying, iterate quickly, keep trying, and do that for a while before you have any idea as to what's going on. And there isn't an easy formula as to how to do that really well. Of course, the shorter you can make the cycles of iteration, the better, because then you're wasting less money and time and resources before you sort of like your next iteration as you learn more things. So I know that was a long sort of response to your question of what would my recommendation be for founders or whatever, but it's not easy for sure.
So no, it's actually very helpful. So let's talk about that iteration process. Iterate quickly. You're not talking about your sprints. You're talking about some kind of a market research iteration. What system would you recommend someone have? What intentional system so that they are getting info and feedback? Is it client feedback? I mean, give some more detail on how you would have done it different to maybe get the data points that you were transitioning from a tailwind to a headwind.
Well, the headwind happened later. Of course, we didn't know that we had tailwind. We just thought we were really good, right? But I think that like and I'm not sure that we would do things differently necessarily from the standpoint of the iterations. But when you're a founder or entrepreneur and you have an idea, and that idea is, it takes a certain amount of effort to get that idea into a product and out the door and into people's hands. The idea with rapid iteration is to try to sort of shorten that as much as possible, get something useful into the hands of people, and then ideally you get feedback from those people, and then you sort of iterate and make it better based on the combination of where you thought you were going with your vision, but now with the new reality of feedback, supplementing that vision. So then you iterate, and if maybe the original idea you were going to take 12 months to build, maybe you put something out there in 6 months or 5 months or 4 months if possible, and then rapidly iterate, and every month or two just keep on putting out new features and capabilities and see if those are resonating. And by the time a year comes, you have probably a very different product than what you had originally envisioned, and it's much more closer to something that might have a chance of success than if you had just built out your product for a year and not ever put it out into customers' hands.
And it sounds like, given that the need for that iteration process, tell me a little bit about your ability to detach yourself from maybe an original concept as you get new feedback. Because I know some people may just be really attached to their idea. I'm going to build it and it's going to come versus what the market's telling you. Was that easy for you? Or was it a bit of a challenge?
To some extent, you have to be stubborn like that to some extent, right? Like you're either right about your idea or you're wrong, but you won't know until you build it. The big question is, how long will you take to build it? How much resources and efforts are you going to put into it to build it? And then V1 is never going to be correct. So how quickly can you get V2 out there and V3 out there, and continue to modify it and hopefully improve to the point where it does have a chance of success. So but as a founder, I think like you do have to have a certain level of stubbornness that like, hey, what I'm doing is going to work. Otherwise, like, how are other people going to believe in you and work for you and try to get there? There's got to be this sort of like this absolute belief that this is what we're building and this is the vision and this is where we're going, and all of those convictions have to really come through very clearly, right?
Yeah. And to your point, I know you started a new company, Savvy Trader. When did you start that initiative? Like a year ago-ish or a year and a half ago? How long was it? A couple of years?
Yeah, it's been about a year and a half now. It was March of last year, March of 2022.
March of 2022. Okay.
Yeah,
and I remember you were sharing the idea with me, and you were so excited. You still are excited and passionate about it. So, and you had the opportunity to basically do whatever you wanted. You didn't have to start something new, but it seems to me like you took some time to really find the next thing that you are just super excited about. So why don't you share a little bit about what that journey was like, given that you've had a few successes? So what was it? What was the magic formula that in your mind you said, yeah, this is the thing that I'm going to pour myself into?
Well, first of all, the reason I started another software company is just because like I really enjoy building stuff, like building products. And I realized I get a lot of personal satisfaction and enjoyment and happiness from building things that other people use, right? So the fundamental reason for me starting another software company is that, right? It's like I don't need any more money. I can live the rest of my life and be totally fine. And but that enjoyment aspect would be missing, and it feels like life would be boring without sort of like having something to do, right? So that was the fundamental reason as to why I did Savvy Trader in particular. It's because it was a personal need that I couldn't find a solution to, which is this sort of ability to be able to share your investment portfolio with family and friends and people who might be interested in seeing how you're investing. And not necessarily with the dollar amounts, but with the percentages of what you're investing in. So oftentimes I'm talking about the stocks that I own and with friends or family, and like people, like the next time that I might talk to that same person might be 6 months from now, and I may have sold something or bought more of something as the prices may have gone up or down, or as the situation may have changed, but that person wouldn't necessarily know. Like my sister wouldn't know that I have bought more of something or completely gotten out of a particular stock. So I thought, how cool would it be if they could get notifications every time I make a trade, and look for a tool that's out there to do that thing. And there isn't anything out there except for Savvy Trader. So on Savvy Trader, you can recreate your portfolio in like 30 seconds. People can subscribe to your portfolio, get SMS text message or email notifications or in-app notifications every time you make a trade, and keep up with your portfolio if they want to. And of course, besides that sort of personal use for that, there's people who are out there talking about investments all the time, and they have oftentimes they have hundreds of thousands of followers on Twitter or on YouTube or whatever, and they don't have a way to share their actual portfolios with their audience. And Savvy Trader sort of provides that mechanism for them, so that they can share their portfolio and other people can see exactly what they're doing. And more importantly, they can see the history of their performance. Has this person actually done well over the past year, or have they done worse than I have? Right. So that's an important factor, and people haven't been able to sort of prove their past performance. Whereas with Savvy Trader, again, this is something you can sort of prove, because we use real-time pricing in terms of when trades are put into Savvy Trader. So it's a product that solves a particular need that I had, and I think that lots of other people have. And of course, just like any other startup, we're sort of trying to iterate quickly and build and find our audience, and it takes time to get there. So we're just at the beginning stages of that.
Are you following your past success guidance? Frugal, iterative decisions, or are you looking for funding, or where are you at this point?
Right now, it's self-funded because I don't like taking other people's money unless I'm fairly certain that something is going to grow from a financial perspective fairly rapidly.
Wait! You heard it here first. Hold on. You are not willing to take other people's money unless you're certain it's going to be successful? Amazing.
At least I have a high level of confidence, and even though I have
that's refreshing, because every now and then people approach me and I am pretty sure they can care less if there's a return. They just want the money side of it. So yes,
Yeah.
that's awesome, and your track record shows it. So thank you.
But it's different when you're already sort of like rich, I guess, to go out raising money, and then if you fail, then you're like, sorry, I lost your money, but I'm still rich. Don't worry about it. I mean, it feels wrong to.
It doesn't feel right, yeah.
To at least not use your own money in the initial phases, anyway. So we're still pre-revenue, and but yeah, we're absolutely using this sort of very frugal. We have a very small team of 6 people. Highly focused on product development, and anybody who goes to Savvy Trader will be, I think, very impressed by the tool, by the capabilities of it. Just even getting a stock quote on there is, I think, a better experience than most places. There's no ads. There's more information that organized in a much better way. There's earnings calendars of when stocks are reporting earnings. We literally have the best earnings calendar on the planet, and so there's a lot of goodness that has already been built, and we're iterating every week. We're adding more capabilities that I think are pretty exciting and unique, and for the team size, it's mind-blowing what the team is doing. But yeah, we're still pre-revenue. We still haven't hit hundreds of thousands of users, which is where we really need to be in order for it to be a viable product. But we're also only a year and a half into it, so it's looking promising.
Well, I enjoy your product, and since I don't have time to really dig into what I invest in, I enjoy your succinct insights as to why you're investing in a certain stock. So I appreciate that. So with a few minutes we have left, and by the way, audience, if you're live or even if you're watching the recast on this, go ahead. You can put your comments in if there's any specific questions you'd like me to ask Hamid. I'll be happy to. One question I do have, you've been around the startup community, software community, tech community for a long time. What are what is maybe one item that people seem to take on as conventional wisdom that you disagree with, or you'd like to add some color to, that you think would be helpful for anyone listening to this, viewing this?
I think that like as an entrepreneur, oftentimes you realize that like so much of people's assumptions are wrong, right? Right? Like uh, and that just comes up on a daily basis. It's so frequent that you don't even think about it after a while anymore. That like conventional wisdom is not at all useful. Um, but you know, like one thing that sort of comes to mind that you know, just going in, like it's a fairly reasonable assumption that like if you're building a business, you probably have to be right more often than you're wrong in order to build a successful business, right? Uh, and if you said that to anyone, they'd be like, "Yeah, that sounds right." I mean, like obviously you need to be right mostly in order to build a successful business. But what's funny is that you actually don't have to be. You could be wrong 9 out of 10 times, and still build an incredibly successful business. And the reason is because the one times that you are right could way make up for the times that you're wrong. So, you know, to sort of put this in practice, let's say you run a marketing department for a company, and marketing is oftentimes a series of experiments to see what works, right? And it's quite possible if you have, let's say, you know, $100,000 budget, and you break it up into like 10 different $10,000 experiments, that 9 out of those 10 experiments might fail and generate zero return on investment. But that one $10,000 investment that is a success could easily generate a $500,000 return on investment, right? And it turns out that that one experiment could have had a 50x return, making up for all the 9 times that you were wrong. And that's true across the board, right? Like whether it's a product feature or product direction or pricing strategy or you know, you could be wrong way more often than you're right. And I think that I'm definitely in that boat that I'm wrong way more often than I'm right. But fortunately, you don't have to be right most of the time in order to build a great company. So that's something that's probably not sort of common sense that takes time to sort of realize. And by the
Thank
way,
you.
that's probably the reason why so many people who are like extremely wealthy shock you in the in how little they might be good at or smart, or you know, because it doesn't take those things. You know, you don't have to be super smart. You know, like sometimes you run into people, you're like, how is this person successful? Well, it's because they kept trying stuff, right? And keeping trying stuff is far more important than anything else.
So with your you just need to get it right once. Let's go on the flip side of that, and maybe, you know, since you don't have a lot of time left, but when it comes to you, I know you've invested in a lot of startups and different organizations. What are the top couple things you look for before you make an investment?
The biggest thing for me for startups is a founder or team. The sort of founder being the sort of most important, or co-founders, and then the sort of product idea and their ability to execute on it, right? So if I can say like, yes, I'm impressed by the founder, I trust them. Trust is a really important point. Like if a founder says, for example, that they have something, or they have 3 customers already, and it turns out they only have 2, or you know, there are misses in their accuracy of information that they put out, or that they embellish. I oftentimes stay away from an investment in those founders. But if they're spot on, or if they seem to really understand the details of their subject matter, that's huge. That's a check mark. Then if I like the idea or market space or whatever, if that's a check, then it's sort of like, okay, do I believe that this team can execute on the combination of these things? So there's like pretty basic 3 checks, and then I'm like in on writing a check and then leaving them alone. So I'm a long-term investor. I generally don't sort of involve myself into the day-to-day operations of those businesses.
Thank you, Hamid. That's very helpful, and some of the people in the audience listening, I think that those are really great pieces of advice, because when I look back at investments that didn't go well, there was definitely a lot of embellishment. And there's a phrase I use. I say, hey, that people believe their deck. Like, everyone makes these PowerPoint decks with hockey stick, and it's just like the same thing over and over. It's like, as the founder, you need to be realistic.
Right.
There's a time for road showing and hyping, but like, if for that trust, you really need to be realistic. So I appreciate that guidance. Super helpful.
The hockey stick graph in people's presentations is often comical. People feel like they have to have it, and in my opinion, you don't have to have it if you're pitching to me, but if you do have it, then I'm going to look at the numbers and judge you based on what you put on there, because it's basically always numbers pulled out of thin air, right? Like, there is no easy justification for the numbers. Sure, you have a spreadsheet, that says you're going to sell 1,800 at Y dollars, and then it's going to grow to 3,000 the next month, and 5,000 the following month. And so
all I need is just 1%. 1% of the market. That's all I need.
That's right. 1% of 7 billion times $20 per. Yeah. But anyway, I think that a far more important graph is any kind of historical traction of something that someone has built, right? And it doesn't have to be a graph of revenue, but it could be a graph of the number of users that are using the product. And that could be like, hey, it grew from 3 users in month 1 to, or 3 companies to, 10 to 25 and to 50. Now, none of them are paying, but that's a great looking graph, right? Like 50 people are using your product, and it used to be 10. That means something. That means that people like it, even if they don't have to pay for it yet, right? So you can turn that into a company.
Thank you so much, Hamid, for your time and joining us on Unlocking Success. Thank you for everyone who joined us live, and for those of you who watch this in a recast, feel free to add your comments. We'll go through and respond appropriately. Have a great rest of your day, everyone. Thank you, Hamid. Bye-bye.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks, Alijan.